They never planned to stop that night, but fate had other plans. The highway stretched endlessly under a gray, restless sky. Ethan's hands gripped the steering wheel as rain began to splatter across the windshield. It was supposed to be a simple drive. 2 hours, some coffee stops, soft music, and laughter echoing in the car. Claire sat beside him, scrolling through her playlist, humming quietly, the kind of sound that made silence feel alive. Everything was fine until that one sound, a metallic clunk, broke the rhythm. The car shuddered once, twice, and then the engine went dead. The headlights dimmed. The music stopped. Ethan's heart sank. No. He tried the ignition again, but the dashboard remained dark. The wipers froze mid-swipe, raindrops gathering into streaks across the glass. Claire looked up, puzzled. "Did it just die?" she asked softly. He nodded, jaw tight. "Yeah, it's done." They were stranded on Route 42, a lonely stretch between 2 small towns, where the nearest gas station was probably miles away. Rain kept falling, steady and cold, tapping against the roof like impatient fingers. Ethan popped the hood and stepped out, his jacket immediately soaked. Steam hissed from somewhere under the engine. He had no tools, no idea what broke, and no signal bars strong enough to stream a miracle. Inside the car, Claire waited, shivering slightly. Her phone's flashlight cut through the dark, casting soft light on the raindrops running down her window. She wasn't angry, just quiet. That silence between them was heavier than the storm. Finally, Ethan climbed back inside, dripping wet. "It's the alternator," he muttered. "We're not going anywhere tonight." Claire tilted her head, a faint smile tugging her lips. "Maybe it's a sign. We've been rushing all week. Maybe the universe is forcing us to stop for a second." He exhaled slowly, trying to find comfort in her calmness. "Guess the universe has a cruel sense of humor." She laughed softly, brushing a wet strand of hair behind her ear. "Maybe, but at least we're together." That simple line in that quiet car made Ethan pause. The tension faded just enough for a smile to return to his face. He grabbed his phone again, scrolling through patchy service until one small name appeared. The Evergreen Inn, 5 miles ahead. "There's a motel not far from here," he said. "Old place, but it'll do for the night." They called for a tow truck, then started walking toward the distant glow of streetlights, rain still falling. Ethan held his jacket over Claire's head, trying to shield her. She laughed at the effort. "You're going to catch a cold," she teased. He looked at her, hair damp, cheeks pink from the chill. Worth it. By the time they reached the inn, both were soaked to the bone. It was a small building off the highway. Wooden sign, old porch light, warm yellow glow spilling from the windows. The bell above the door jingled as they stepped inside. The air smelled faintly of coffee and pine, the kind of scent that feels like a hug. An older woman stood at the front desk, smiling kindly. "Rough night?" she asked. "You could say that," Ethan replied, shaking off his jacket. "Well," she said, checking her register, "you're in luck. 1 room left." Ethan hesitated for a moment, glancing at Claire. The woman handed over a key attached to a small wooden tag with the number 7 carved into it. "2nd floor, end of the hall. Towels are fresh. Coffee's free until midnight." Claire took the key before Ethan could say anything. "Thank you," she said with a smile. They walked upstairs, shoes squeaking against the old wooden floor. When they reached the room, Ethan opened the door, and warm air greeted them. The room was small but cozy. 1 bed, 1 lamp, a small window with rain tapping softly against it. Claire placed her bag down and looked around. "Not bad," she said, amused. "It's actually kinda cute." Ethan nodded, though his mind was somewhere else. He felt uneasy. Not about the storm, not even about the car, but about the silence that had started to grow between them lately. This trip was supposed to fix that, but now, stuck in one room, he wasn't sure if it would heal them or break them further. Claire noticed the look on his face. "You're thinking too much again," she said gently. He forced a chuckle. "You know me too well." She smiled faintly. "That used to be a good thing." Her tone was light, but there was something behind it, something unspoken. Ethan caught it but didn't push. Instead, he walked over to the small heater, turned it on, and handed her one of the dry towels. "Here, warm up. I'll make some coffee," he said. Claire took the towel, their fingers brushing briefly. A small electric touch that made both of them pause for a second too long. "Thanks," she whispered. He nodded, pretending not to feel the ache that simple touch left behind. The coffee machine gurgled softly in the corner, while the rain continued its steady rhythm outside. For a few minutes, the world felt still again, like time had slowed just for them. Claire sat on the bed, watching the steam rise from her cup. "You ever think about how things change?" she asked quietly. "One minute you're driving somewhere together. The next, life just stops." Ethan looked up, meeting her eyes. "Yeah," he said. "Sometimes I think life breaks down on purpose, so we remember what really matters." She smiled faintly at that, then turned her gaze to the window. "Maybe." They talked for a while after that. Small things, quiet things. The kind of conversations that fill empty rooms with memories. For a moment, it almost felt like old times again. But then Claire's expression shifted. She stared into her cup, her hands tightening slightly. "Ethan," she began softly. He looked at her, concerned. "What's wrong?" She hesitated, eyes glistening with something he couldn't read. "There's something I need to tell you before morning." The room fell silent. The only sound was the rain tapping the glass and the faint hum of the heater. Ethan froze, heart pounding as a dozen thoughts raced through his mind. What could she mean? What was she hiding? Claire didn't look up. She just stared at her coffee like it held the courage she needed. Ethan swallowed hard. "Claire, you're scaring me." "What is it?" She met his eyes then, calm, but trembling just enough to show fear. "It's not something I can say twice," she whispered. "So you have to promise you'll listen." He nodded slowly. "I promise." She took a deep breath, voice shaking. "Tomorrow morning, everything between us might change." And before he could ask what she meant, the lights flickered, thunder cracked outside, and the room fell into dim shadows. Claire turned away, her face hidden in the half-light. Ethan stood there, frozen, heart pounding against the silence. He wanted to speak, to ask, to demand an answer, but something in her expression told him not to. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, marking every second between them like a warning. Outside, the rain fell harder, washing over the world beyond their window. Inside, two people sat in the glow of a single lamp, close enough to touch, but suddenly oceans apart. Claire looked at him, her voice breaking. "If I tell you the truth, you might not look at me the same way ever again. Some truths only reveal themselves when there's nowhere left to run." The room felt smaller than before. The air was still, heavy with something unsaid. The rain outside had softened to a faint drizzle, but inside, Ethan's heart was pounding like thunder. Claire sat at the edge of the bed, her hands twisted together, eyes fixed on the floor. She looked fragile, like someone standing on the edge of a truth she wasn't ready to share. Ethan tried to speak first, to break the tension. "Claire, what do you mean by everything changing?" His voice was steady, but the worry beneath it was sharp. She lifted her head, her eyes meeting his for a brief, trembling second. "I should have told you sooner," she whispered. "I didn't want it to happen like this." Ethan frowned, stepping closer. "Told me what?" She took a deep breath, exhaling shakily. "I got the job. In Toronto. The offer came last month." For a second, Ethan didn't react. The words didn't register. Or maybe he didn't want them to. "Toronto?" he repeated, voice quieter now. Claire nodded, eyes wet. "It's a big opportunity, Ethan. It's something I've wanted for years. But I didn't tell you because I didn't know how." He ran a hand through his hair, pacing slowly. The wooden floor creaked under his steps. "You weren't even going to tell me?" "I was," she said quickly. "Just not like this. I didn't want to ruin our weekend. I thought maybe I could wait until I was sure." Ethan turned toward her, hurt flashing in his eyes. "Sure about what? About me or about leaving?" Claire froze. The question cut deeper than she expected. She opened her mouth to answer, but no words came out. The silence between them said enough. He let out a bitter laugh. Not angry, just hollow. "So that's it, huh? One more stop before goodbye." "It's not like that," she said softly. I haven't even decided if I'll go yet. He looked at her sharply. Then why does it sound like you already have? Claire blinked hard, her eyes filling again. Because maybe I already know I need to, she whispered. The words hung in the air like smoke. Ethan leaned back against the wall, exhaling deeply, his mind spinning. You're running from something, Claire. From us. She shook her head. No, I'm trying to find myself again. Somewhere along the way, I forgot who I was outside of this. She gestured between them. And I can't keep pretending I don't feel that. Ethan fell silent. The sound of her voice, so calm yet full of quiet pain, tore at him more than anger ever could. He wanted to argue, to convince her that love should be enough. But deep down he knew. Sometimes love alone can't fix what life pulls apart. He finally whispered, You could have told me. I would have supported you, Claire smiled sadly. I know, that's why it's harder. Because you always understand, even when it hurts. They sat there for a long time, not speaking, not moving. The room's only light came from the small lamp beside the bed, a faint amber glow that painted their faces in soft sadness. It was the kind of silence that didn't need words to be loud. Ethan finally broke it. When would you leave? Next week, she said quietly. His stomach turned. So soon, she nodded. They want me there before the new project starts. He rubbed his hands over his face, trying to hold himself together. And you weren't going to tell me until we got back? Claire's voice cracked. I thought maybe if this trip went right, if we laughed again, if things felt like they used to, maybe I'd stay. Her confession hit him like a wave. So this weekend was a test, he said quietly. She shook her head quickly. No, Ethan, that's not what I meant. But it was, he interrupted. You were trying to see if we were still worth it. Claire's tears finally fell. I didn't mean to hurt you. I just needed to know if we were still us. Ethan took a step closer, his voice trembling. And what's your answer? She looked up at him, eyes full of regret. I don't know. He laughed under his breath, but it wasn't amusement. It was disbelief. You don't know, he repeated, shaking his head. After everything, that's all you can say? Claire reached out, but he stepped back. Ethan, please. Don't make it sound like I don't care. You're the only person who ever made me feel like home. He looked at her. Really looked. The woman sitting in front of him wasn't the same one who used to plan their future over coffee or dance barefoot in the living room at midnight. She looked tired, conflicted, but still the same person he loved, and that made it worse. He sat down beside her, his voice barely above a whisper. If you go, will you ever come back? Claire's eyes shimmered in the dim light. I can't promise that. The rain started again, soft and steady, as if the world outside had decided to cry for them. Neither of them spoke for a while, the room filled with the sound of rain and quiet heartbreak. Ethan leaned forward, elbows on his knees, staring at the carpet. You know what's crazy? He said, his tone oddly calm now. I don't blame you. I get it, you want more. You need space. I just wish you didn't have to disappear to find it. Claire swallowed hard. Maybe one day you'll understand. He looked at her, eyes glassy but dry. Maybe one day you'll regret not staying. The words hit her like a whisper of truth she didn't want to hear. She looked away, her chest tightening. For a long time, they just sat there, two people who still loved each other, but were already standing on opposite sides of goodbye. Finally, Ethan stood up, turned off the lamp, and said quietly, Then maybe tonight is our last night together. The darkness filled the room, leaving only the faint blue glow of the streetlight outside. Claire stared into the shadows, her throat tight, heart heavy. She wanted to say something, anything, but the words wouldn't come. The sound of rain against the window seemed to slow time itself. Every drop felt like a countdown to something inevitable. Ethan lay on his side of the bed, staring at the ceiling. Claire turned the other way, tears silent against her pillow. The distance between them had never felt so wide. And just before sleep claimed her, she whispered into the quiet, I wish we could start over. Ethan's eyes stayed open, listening, but he didn't answer. Maybe he didn't know how. Maybe it was too late. When dawn came, Claire reached out to touch his hand. But the space beside her was empty, the pillow cold, and the sound of the rain was all that remained. When the clock ticks past midnight, every word starts to mean more. The rain had finally stopped, but the silence it left behind was heavier than before. The motel room glowed faintly under the orange light spilling in through the thin curtains. Claire sat by the window, wrapped in a blanket, her eyes fixed on the wet highway outside. Ethan lay awake on the bed behind her, pretending to sleep, though his thoughts were anything but still. Every breath, every heartbeat, felt louder in the quiet. The air between them was full of things neither dared to say. Claire's confession from earlier replayed in Ethan's mind again and again. Toronto, leaving, change. Words that had once sounded exciting when spoken by someone else now felt like a goodbye he wasn't ready to hear. She turned slightly. "You're not asleep, are you?" she asked softly. He hesitated, then answered, "No." Claire looked down. "Didn't think so. You've never been good at pretending?" He gave a half-smile that faded almost immediately. "And you've never been good at hiding things." That made her pause. She knew he was right. There was no hiding from this, not tonight. The truth was out, and there was no taking it back. For a while, they just listened to the sound of distant cars passing on the highway, water splashing under their tires. It felt strange, sitting there like strangers after everything they had shared. Finally, Claire spoke again. "Do you ever think about how it all started?" Ethan's eyes softened. "Every day," she smiled faintly. "You were late to our first date. Said your car broke down then, too." He laughed quietly. "Guess I've got a theme going." "Maybe it's not the car," she said. "Maybe life just keeps stopping us when we try to rush it." He turned to look at her. "Or maybe it's warning us when something's about to end." The words stung more than he expected. Claire looked away, hiding the pain in her eyes. "I don't want it to end like this," she said. "Then how do you want it to end?" He asked. She didn't answer right away. Her eyes drifted toward the rain-soaked glass, where the motel sign reflected faintly, vacancy flickering in red. "I don't know," she said finally. "Maybe with understanding, maybe with peace." Ethan got up, walked over to her, and stood beside the window. The reflection showed them both, tired, quiet, but still drawn together by something deeper than words. "You know," he said softly, "you could still stay. We could fix things." Claire smiled weakly. "You always want to fix things, Ethan. But some things aren't broken. They just change shape," he frowned. "And what does that mean for us?" She turned to face him, her expression calm but sad. "It means maybe we're not who we were before. And that's okay." He didn't know whether to agree or fight it. The thought of letting her go felt impossible, yet holding on to something that was slipping away felt even worse. The clock on the nightstand showed 12:47 a.m. The world outside was asleep, but in that little room, time seemed to move differently. Claire suddenly stood up and walked to the coffee maker. "Do you want some?" she asked, pouring hot water over a small packet. He chuckled. "Coffee at midnight? You never change." "Exactly," she said softly. "Some parts of me stay the same, no matter what." Ethan looked at her, the way her hair fell over her shoulder, the faint tired smile, the gentleness that had always drawn him in. "That's what I'll miss most," he said quietly. Claire's hands froze for a second before she turned around. "Don't say that." "It makes it harder." He walked closer, stopping just a foot away. "It's already hard." The silence that followed felt different this time. Warmer but fragile. Claire's eyes glistened under the dim light. "You know what I remember most?" Ethan asked. She looked up. "What?" "That night at the lake. You said getting lost was the best part of any trip." Claire smiled through the tears forming in her eyes. "We ended up 3 hours off course." "And still called it perfect," he said softly. "Because it was," she whispered. Ethan nodded. "Maybe that's what this is too, just getting lost again." Claire's eyes flickered with emotion. "You think we'll ever find our way back?" "Maybe," he said, voice breaking slightly. If the road doesn't end first. She reached up, brushing her fingers against his sleeve, a light, hesitant touch. You make it sound like a goodbye, he met her gaze. Maybe it is. Or maybe it's just a pause. The clock ticked softly. The air smelled faintly of rain and coffee. Everything about the moment felt suspended, like the universe itself was holding its breath. Claire's voice trembled as she spoke. Ethan, if I go, will you hate me? He shook his head slowly. No, but I'll miss you in every quiet place. The words hit her harder than she expected. She blinked fast, but the tears came anyway. You always know how to make me cry, she said, laughing weakly through the ache. He smiled faintly. You always know how to make me care. Neither of them spoke after that. They just stood there, side by side, staring out at the dark, rain-soaked highway that stretched endlessly into the unknown. Eventually, Claire turned away, crawling into bed. Ethan followed, lying beside her but not too close. The distance was small, yet it felt like a mile. Minutes passed in silence. The hum of the heater filled the room. Somewhere outside, a truck rumbled past, fading into the distance. Then, just as Claire's eyes began to close, Ethan whispered, If you ever come back, I'll still be here. Her heart clenched. Don't wait for me, she whispered back. I won't have to, he said softly. You're already here. She turned to face him, her eyes glistening in the faint light. Ethan? She started, but before she could finish, he gently placed a hand over hers, not to hold her back, but to let her know he understood. Neither said another word. The silence that followed wasn't cold anymore. It was something tender, something final. Claire watched him close his eyes, the faint rise and fall of his chest steady and calm. For the first time that night, she realized love didn't always mean staying. Sometimes it meant knowing when to let go. She stayed awake until the first light of dawn brushed across the curtains. Birds began to chirp faintly in the distance. The world was waking up, even as something inside her was quietly ending. She sat up, looking at Ethan sleeping peacefully, the faintest smile on his lips. He looked lighter, as if part of him had already accepted what she couldn't yet say aloud. Claire reached for her phone, opened the email from the company in Toronto, and hovered her thumb over the word accept. She didn't press it, not yet. Her hand trembled, her heart hurt, and then quietly she whispered to herself, maybe this isn't the end. Maybe it's just where the story changes. The sun began to rise, painting the room in soft gold. Claire turned toward Ethan one last time, memorizing every detail. The way his hair fell over his forehead, the crease between his brows, the calm that never quite hid the pain. She smiled faintly, whispering, Thank you for everything. When morning came, Claire reached out to wake him, but the space beside her was empty, the bed cold, and a folded note waited on the nightstand. Some goodbyes don't need words, just the silence they leave behind. The first light of morning crept through the curtains, soft and golden. Claire stirred, reaching across the bed instinctively, but her hand met nothing but cold sheets. Her eyes opened slowly, and for a moment she thought maybe he'd gone to get coffee. Maybe he'd come back in a minute. But then she saw it, a folded note on the nightstand, the paper slightly curled at the edges. Her heart sank before she even touched it. Ethan's handwriting was messy but familiar, the kind she could recognize even in the dark. She picked it up with trembling fingers and unfolded it. The tow truck came early. Didn't want to wake you. Drive safe, Claire. If you ever come back down Route 42, I'll be right where the car broke down. Her breath caught halfway through reading. It wasn't just a note. It was a goodbye written in quiet pain. She pressed the paper to her chest, staring at the empty space beside her. The air still smelled faintly like his cologne, mixed with rain and coffee. Claire sat there for a long time, letting the silence fill the room. The heater hummed softly, the only sound left. She should have felt relief. One decision had been made for her. But instead, she felt something else. Something heavier. The woman at the front desk greeted her with a warm smile as she checked out. Leaving already, dear? Claire nodded weakly. Yeah, just heading home. The woman looked at her for a moment, eyes kind. Storm's cleared. The roads will be gentle now. Claire smiled faintly, not sure why those words made her throat tighten. I hope so. Outside, the world looked clean, washed by rain. The sky was a pale blue, streaked with sunlight breaking through the clouds. Claire stepped into the cold air and took a deep breath. Somewhere far away, a bird sang. Everything felt normal again, except her heart. She walked toward the parking lot and stopped. Ethan's car was gone, replaced by a damp patch of asphalt and silence. For a moment, she just stood there, holding her bag and the note. She wanted to call him, to say something, but what could she possibly say? Her phone buzzed once, a message from the company in Toronto. We'd love to confirm your arrival next week. Claire stared at the screen, then at the road stretching beyond the motel. The same highway they'd driven together, the same road where everything had changed. She put the phone away. Not yet. She wasn't ready to move forward just yet. She drove slowly that morning, taking the long way back. The trees shimmered with leftover rain, sunlight glinting off every drop. Each mile reminded her of last night, his quiet voice, his soft smile, the way he said he'd still be there if she ever came back. At a gas station a few towns over, she stopped for coffee. The man behind the counter asked, "You okay, miss? You look like you've been through a storm." Claire smiled faintly. Yeah, something like that. Back in the car, she unfolded Ethan's note again. The ink had smudged slightly from her fingers, but the words were still clear. She traced each one, whispering them to herself. If you ever come back down Route 42, something about that line felt like a promise. Not a demand, not a plea, just hope. The kind of hope that sits quietly and waits. Days turned into weeks. Claire moved back home, started packing, answering emails from the company. Toronto was waiting. New city, new life, new start. But every time she looked at her calendar, she found herself pausing on one small thought. What if I went back? Sometimes she'd open her window at night and listen to the rain, imagining it falling against the same motel window. She'd picture Ethan, maybe sitting at that old gas station, maybe still fixing his car, maybe still waiting. The thought both comforted and hurt her. Her friends noticed the change. You seem distracted lately, one of them said over lunch. Claire smiled politely. Just thinking about some roads I didn't take. They laughed, not understanding. But she didn't mind. Some things didn't need explaining. Weeks later, on a quiet Sunday evening, Claire packed a small overnight bag and got into her car. She told no one where she was going. The sky was pale and wide, just like that night, except now the rain had given way to the soft glow of spring. As she drove, she passed familiar signs, the diner where they'd once stopped, the stretch of highway where his car had broken down. Every mile felt like a heartbeat leading her back to something unfinished. By the time she reached Route 42 again, dusk had started to fall. The air was cool, the light golden. And there it was, the Evergreen Inn, looking exactly the same. The same porch light, the same wooden sign. Her heart raced as she turned into the parking lot. She wasn't sure what she was expecting. Maybe just closure. Maybe just to see that the world hadn't stopped without them. But then she saw it. A familiar car parked near the edge of the lot, its old paint catching the light. Her breath caught. For a moment, she couldn't move. And then, like a scene pulled from a memory, she saw him, Ethan, leaning against the hood, hands in his pockets, looking out at the road. He looked the same, calm, quiet, but with that familiar glint in his eyes. He turned his head as if he'd known she would come. Their eyes met across the distance, and everything that had been unsaid seemed to fill the space between them. Claire parked slowly and stepped out. The gravel crunched under her shoes, the wind carrying the faint smell of pine. She walked closer, heart pounding, the note still tucked inside her jacket pocket. Neither of them spoke at first. The silence said enough. Then Ethan smiled faintly, the same soft, understanding smile that once made her feel safe. "You came back," he said quietly. Claire nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "I said I might." He laughed softly. "You always kept your word." She looked at him, eyes glistening. "And you waited." "I told you I would," he said. "Some things are worth waiting for." For a long moment, they just stood there. Two people who had drifted apart only to find their way back to the same road, the same place, but not quite the same hearts. Claire stepped closer. "I didn't take the job," she said quietly. "Not yet." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Why not?" She smiled faintly. "Because I wanted to see what still feels real before I start over." He nodded slowly. "And?" Claire looked out at the road stretching ahead, the sun dipping below the trees. "This," she said. "Right now, it feels real." The wind picked up, rustling the leaves, wrapping them in the kind of silence that only exists when words aren't needed. Ethan took a deep breath. "You think fate gives second chances?" Claire smiled. "Maybe not, but sometimes people do." They stood there until the sky turned soft purple, until the last traces of sunlight faded behind the hills. The world around them felt still, like it was waiting to see what they would choose next. As night fell, Claire looked at him and whispered, "If we drive again." "Do you think the car will make it this time?" Ethan smiled, starting the engine, and just as the headlights flickered on, the screen of her phone lit up with one new message. "Final chance to confirm your position in Toronto.